Here just to hear your story. So first of all, just obviously you're Peter Crabb. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, born and raised in church. Well, from the age of 4 years old, I was brought up in church.
Uh-huh.
Married for the past 22 years and have 5 children.
Five children.
Yep.
Wow.
And I work in a drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre in Norwich. Brought up in a Christian home. Great parents. Mum and dad are really good, but we all make mistakes as parents. I'm a parent now myself, so made a few mistakes along the way. But there was a lot of pressure on me from a very young age, being the minister's son,
Right.
or eventually becoming the minister's son, to act a certain way, to be a certain way. A lot of damage was done at a very young age. Over the past 3 years, I've sort of been evaluating my younger years.
Yeah.
To try and figure out where it went wrong.
Right.
And I think a lot of damage was done to me at a very young age, in church and out of church.
Tell me about that. What do you mean by that?
Abused at a very young age, sexually abused. I'm not exactly sure how old I was. I think I was 6, 7 years old.
Right.
And that was by someone in church and someone out of church. It was two people.
Was it separate or was it two people that knew each other?
No, they didn't know each other. No, it was separate, two separate occasions.
Right.
But I was very young. I wasn't aware of what was happening to me at the time. It wasn't
Right.
until I got into my sort of young teenage years that I realised what had been done, and the damage it had caused.
So you didn't forget it when you got to your teenagers. It was still
No,
in your mind.
no, it was still in my mind. Also, all of the bullying I went through as well, being dyslexic in the sort of mid to late 80s. It wasn't really recognised as a thing.
Yeah.
You were just seen as being lazy. So I was put in a classroom with mentally handicapped kids. Of course, I went through a lot of bullying because of that, and also for being the minister's son. And that happened in church as well. That wasn't just out of church. It was in church as well. I was bullied
Right.
quite a
What
lot.
form did the bullying take?
Just it wasn't physical,
Yeah.
physical bullying. That did happen in school, getting in fights and things
Yeah.
like that. But it was taking the mickey out of me because I was dyslexic, minister's son, just bullying, just mean words and bad things being said. And I remember one occasion when I got into my young teenage years, I started smoking, and someone in church, I won't say who it was, I won't name any names, but they were talking to the rest of the youth group. On a Friday night we had a youth group, campaigners, and the person who was running it was talking to all the other kids and says, she said something and says, you don't want to end up like Pete in front of everyone, because
You
I
were
was,
there?
yeah, I was there, yeah, you don't want to end up like Pete.
Right.
And of course, when you have stuff like that input into your life consistently,
Yeah.
you start to believe that you're nothing.
Yeah.
You're useless. You're never going to amount to anything. And I was told all of this stuff. I'm never going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
I'm useless, thick, dumb. It was just relentless, and yeah.
So when you were in church and in your sort of in that life, if you as it were, you had to put a face on. Then you were
Yep.
pretending.
I kind of believed, but didn't believe. I didn't know what to believe, to be honest with you. I was living my mum and dad's faith
Yeah.
and other people's faith, and there was a few things that happened. There was many things that happened during my childhood that knocked my confidence. But
Yeah.
being forced to, for instance, this might seem nothing to some people, but get up and pray for someone. I was, being forced to do that. Come on, get up and pray for these. And I remember this one occasion where I put my hand on this person and I just froze. Nothing was coming out,
Yeah.
and thankfully there was someone stood next to me who saved me.
Yeah.
But little things like that knock your confidence,
Yeah.
and it's the devil, see, you can't do these things.
Yeah.
You ain't going to amount to nothing.
Yeah.
You are thick. You are useless.
Yeah.
And that's how I grew up thinking of myself.
When did you stop going to church? Did you give up with it? Was it that
Yeah,
time?
I would say I stopped. I still, even when I got into my teenage years and I was going through what I imagine we'll discuss in a minute,
Yeah,
um, I still popped into church. I kept my hand in, if
right.
you know what I mean. But I would say it
Kept your account
stopped.
open.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it stopped completely when my mum and dad left Elam.
Right.
The way that was all handled was bad,
Yeah.
and that just completely finished any confidence that I had in Christians or in God.
Right.
You know, I didn't want nothing to do with any of it. I hated all of them.
Right.
Christians, I hated God. You know, I was angry. You
Yeah.
know, and that's when that stopped. And that was probably, I would say, about 2009, 10,
Right.
around that sort of time. And I may have popped in every now and then, but it was every 3 or 4 years or something. It was very, very rare that
Right.
I would go because I just didn't want to be around it.
Right.
I thought there's no way God can be there if I've gone through all of this stuff that I've gone through, and
Yeah.
I was just a very, very angry person.
When did you start taking drugs? Because you said that started in your teenage years.
Um, I think I had my first joint, and that's how it started with cannabis when I was about 16, 17.
Right.
Yeah, and I was smoking. I started at 15.
Right.
So yeah, that's when I started. I started working full time at 15. So I
Right.
left school. You know, in them days, you know, you left very young. So I was 15 when I left high school, and I went straight into a woodwork factory. So I went from being a boy into a man's world,
Yeah.
you know, just like that. And I wasn't prepared for it.
Right.
I was having all this stuff thrown at me, pornography, cigarettes, a man's world in a
Yeah.
factory. You know,
Yeah.
this wasn't an office environment. It was
Yeah.
a man's world, and I was exposed to stuff at a very young age that I wasn't prepared for and I couldn't handle.
So what happened? Tell me about it.
I would just try to fit in, so I would do. You know, if someone offered me a cigarette, I'd smoke it. If
Yeah.
someone offered me a pint, I'd drink it. If someone offered me a spliff,
Yeah.
I would smoke it. And I was just trying to fit in. You know, I felt accepted, I think,
Yeah.
by that particular group at that particular time. But years down the line now, I know they weren't, bothered about me, or they weren't real friends.
Yeah.
If anything, I was. I don't know how you would call it, the joke, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, as a young kid, they were all grown men. You know what it's like when you go into an environment like that. They send you to get the tartan paint and all this
Oh, yeah,
sort
yeah.
of stuff. So
Left-handed screwdriver.
yeah. And yeah, that's when it all started to go downhill pretty quick.
Right. What was happening inside you during that period?
Uh, I was just very confused, very lost, and spiraling out of control very, very, very quickly. And from trying things like cannabis and stuff like that, it quickly spiraled into harder stuff. Like I remember taking my first ecstasy tablet. I was in the Showcase Cinema in Coventry, and I was watching the first American Pie movie, and I took this pill before I went into the cinema with a friend of mine who you know, but I won't mention who it was. And got about a quarter of the way into the movie, and this ecstasy tablet started to kick in. It was like the best feeling in the world. You know, I was filled with all of this confidence, and the tablet was actually called a Superman pill, and it made me feel like Superman.
Right.
And I just was filled with all of this confidence, and I just felt awesome, loads of energy, and it was the opposite of how I was feeling without that drug, if you
Yeah.
know what I mean. So I quickly got addicted to that,
Right.
very quickly, and went through I think it was about a 4 to 6 month period where I was taking them every day, probably between 6 and 10 ecstasy tablets a day, and,
Wow.
and I quickly lost a lot of weight. I went down to about 7.5 stone. Obviously looked very ill, and got to such a point where I had to go to the doctors because I was feeling so bad, and told him what I was doing, and he says, I'll give you a year. I said, what do you mean you give me a year? He said, I'll give you a year before you're dead. I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And he says, if you keep doing and living like you are, you know, because I was going on about 2 or 3. My dad will tell you I was disappearing for days. They didn't know where I was. Didn't have mobile phones then. This is in the mid to late 90s, and yeah, I was just spiraling out of control really, really quick, and doing coke, speed, acid. I mean, I was trying all of it. The only thing I didn't try, thank the Lord, is heroin and stuff like that, because I was terrified of needles.
Right.
So I didn't touch anything like that, but it was all party drugs because I still felt in control.
Yeah.
You know, while I was doing it.
Obviously, you're still a teenager now. You're still in your sort of young age. You wanted to talk about. You said about you'd been through some sexual abuse as a youngster,
Mm-hmm.
and that had left you confused about your own sexuality.
Yep.
Tell me about that. What happened there?
Yeah, abused. I grew up, and it wasn't until what happened 3 years ago that I started evaluating or reevaluating and looking back on my life and thinking, where did things go so badly wrong? And it started with the abuse,
Yeah.
the sexual abuse that I went through at 6 or 7 years old, and that is when I feel I was robbed of how my life was supposed to pan out.
Yeah.
And working with people who struggle with addiction now, you normally find there's some form of trauma that's happened in their younger years, which is why they're going through what they're going through now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same in my life. I went through a very traumatic experience at a very young age, and that contributed to my life going the way it did up until the age of 42.
Yeah.
And yeah, I struggled with sexuality. I'm very open about that. I've never identified as being gay, but I thought I was definitely bisexual.
This is before you were married.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
before I was married. Yeah,
Right.
this is ever since I can remember. You know,
Right.
I was having these feelings or thoughts, urges, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And of course, growing up in a church and being the minister's son, and being told what we were being told in the church in them days, that you are damned to hell if you think of anything like that, only added to what I was going through, and I thought there was no hope for me.
Right.
So yeah, I was. They call it same-sex attracted
Yeah.
now. I would say more so to women than guys, but that has been. I don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
What happened 3 years ago, I was driving home. I was used to engage in things like dogging and cruising. I got addicted to sex addiction, whatever you want to call it. Because I was struggling with my sexuality, I was having all these urges, so I go to certain places to fulfill those desires.
Yeah.
And I was driving home one night from one of these places, riddled with guilt. I would drive to these places, excited, because you get to scratch that itch. If it was, you know, it's like when you're an alcoholic or something, you need a drink. You know, when you've had that first drink, it's like you can breathe. You know, going to these places was the same thing, but then I would drive home riddled with guilt because I'm married and I've got kids.
Yeah.
And having to look at my children and my wife the next day when you wake up knowing what you've done the night before.
Yeah.
It was just like I was in a vice, you know, and I couldn't get out. I felt like I was drowning and I couldn't get out. And 3 years ago, July of 2021, I was driving home from one of these places. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I just couldn't do this anymore. I just wanted to die. I wanted it to end. I just couldn't live with it anymore. And I cried out in my van, God, if you're there, do something, help me. And the very next day, God stepped in and exposed what I was doing, what I was going through.
So what do you mean exposed? What happened?
My daughter came to me one day, the very next day, sorry, and said, have you sent Mum a text? And I said, well, I send your mum texts all the time. And she said, no, this said, what do you like sexually? And instantly I knew what was going on. And I'm not going to go into that any further, but I knew what was going on.
You hadn't sent her a text?
No, no, it was sent from someone else to my wife. So basically, my wife was having an affair.
Yeah.
I don't blame her for that. I want to say that,
Yeah.
that was a result of the way I was living, because I was out almost every single night,
Yeah.
because I wanted to get high, and yeah, addicted to sex, addicted to drugs.
So did she have no idea, your wife?
No, no.
So when you told her, then it was a total shock.
Yeah, when I confronted my wife about the text message and the fact that, you know, basically she was having an affair, or whatever you want to call it. It was, I just felt, I didn't hear an audible voice, but I
Yeah.
felt in my spirit that this was my opportunity to let everything out. This is it. You've
Yeah.
got two paths ahead of you now. Your marriage is in the toilet, or at least it felt like it at the time. I can go down the road of divorce, or we can go down the road of trying to fix this, if at all possible.
Yeah.
And
How long had you been married at this point?
uh, 19 years,
Right. So
19, 20 years
yeah.
roughly. So it's a long time, you
Yeah.
know, and we've had a lot of good times along the time. It's not
Yeah.
all, it wasn't all bad or anything like that. We never had blazing rows or
Yeah.
anything like that. It's just we were two very screwed up people. My wife came from a very abusive background, and I won't go into that too much because that's for her
Yeah.
to say. And I went through an abusive background as well, sexual and emotional abuse. So we were two very messed up people when we got together, and we hadn't dealt with our trauma.
Yeah.
So this was a culmination of all of that.
So you felt this was God intervening then?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You know, from the night before crying out to God for help, and then the next day, everything is out in the open.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm not the sharpest tool at times, but that is, I think, yeah, I put it down to God, and what's come from that. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that,
Right.
that, you know, when I cried out in my van that night for help, God saw my heart, saw how desperate I was, saw how much I meant it, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean, and everything has improved from then.
Tell me about. I mean, you say you got desperate. What does that look like when you say you got desperate that night in your van? What was your options at that
Well,
stage?
if things hadn't have changed then, I was probably close to ending my life. Yeah,
Right.
I couldn't deal with it anymore. I was broken, completely broken.
Yeah.
You know, if this is broken, I'm about 10 feet under that.
Right.
I could not do it anymore. I
Yeah.
was and for anyone who's watching, who's comes from an addictive background, it's an exhausting lifestyle,
Yeah.
because you're controlled by these addictions, whether it be sex, drugs, alcohol. It controls you.
Yeah.
And when I cried out in my van that night, and things started to change, me and my wife opened up to each other. He's freed me from that. I gave my life to God, myself on my own, and I've not smoked or took drugs since. I've not been cheated on my wife, and I feel free, and I feel a peace that I can't put into words.
So tell me, so I mean, for people that generally are going through addictions, usually there's a process of weaning off. Did you go through a weaning off, or
No,
you just it just
just
stopped?
stopped.
How did it stop? So
I just stopped. I don't know how to explain it. I just when I found out what my wife, I suppose it was the shock factor of right, you're about to lose everything
yeah.
here, and I suppose it was a bit of that as well. And I was looking for a way out for years.
Yeah.
I just
Way at what?
a way out of to be free from the sexuality stuff, to be free from addiction, to be free from that lifestyle that I
Yeah.
was living, to be free from those things that have controlled me for so long.
Yeah.
And it was when I gave my life to Jesus that night on my own,
Yeah.
and I started to seek Him. I can't explain it. It's just like
Yes.
it's over.
Yes.
It's finished, and
Yeah.
I haven't craved a cigarette or drugs or sex with other people.
Yeah.
Them urges that I used to have, the sexuality issues, I don't feel that way anymore.
Right.
But I feel for people that are going through all of that, and,
Yeah.
and that's why I do what I do now with my activism and
Yeah.
what have you. But
Tell me about then. you've come to that point. You've called out to Jesus. Immediately, the whole thing comes out in the open. It's probably not how you'd have planned it
No,
in terms of what the answer was.
no.
I suppose maybe you were hoping that you were just going to be by some miracle the urges would go away
Yeah,
and
you would try and block it out, and
without
you
anything.
would go
Yeah,
weeks, months sometimes, and then it would just come back even stronger.
yeah,
And in the end, I suppose I just gave up and just accepted that this is my lot, this is
yes,
my life. I'm just gonna have to hide it the best I can and deal with it the best I can. But it just came to a crashing halt
right,
eventually, and yeah, at 42 years old, when things turned around.
okay.
But
Talk about the turning around then. What's your life been like since? So you've obviously,
well, after July
yeah,
of 2021,
yeah,
when everything was brought out into the light, if you want to say, me and my wife spent months and months and months getting to know each other again and reconnecting, putting each other first, putting my kids first. But going on from July to October, something wasn't right. I wasn't feeling well. I was losing a lot of weight, and I was putting this down to just the stress that I
yeah,
was under. I was under a huge amount of stress leading up to July. But then I went to the toilet one day, and I'll have to go into graphic detail
okay,
here, and stuff was coming out that shouldn't be coming out.
right,
And I thought, oh, so I rung up the doctor, told him my symptoms, and he says, well, we feel you may have gonorrhea or chlamydia. So we advise you to go to the sexual health clinic, which I did, and my wife did as well. And they said we'll do a gonorrhea and a chlamydia test, but they actually and yes, they did a gonorrhea and chlamydia test. Nothing came up, so they said you're clear of that. So I was like, oh, brilliant. But we think you might have a urinary tract infection. That might be what's causing that thing. So we're going to do another blood test. And just as they draw the blood, the lady said to me, could we do a HIV test? I was like, no, we don't need to do that. What do you need to do that for? And she says, well, it's just we do it with everyone now who comes into the clinic. And I was like, no, 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 I don't need to do that. And I think looking back on it, it was out of fear. I just didn't want to know because I was having all of these different symptoms and chronic fatigue that I can't even describe.
yeah,
It was awful, and I could feel my body breaking down.
right.
And
Do you think you're in some sort of denial then? Because obviously you've
yeah,
had
100%.
multiple sexual encounters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it was at its peak. It was bad.
yeah,
I was sleeping with a lot of people.
yeah,
And I didn't want to know because I think I knew deep down. But to cut a long story short, they did a blood test and I got a HIV diagnosis.
yeah,
I had a second test because they never diagnosed you on one test and it came back as positive again. So I was told over the phone, which probably wasn't a good way of informing someone of that. And um, when you get told that, I thought I was going to die. And my body was dying
yeah.
because HIV will kill you over a very long period of time, up to 10 years. And it's not a nice feeling
No,
to feel your body breaking down and to feel your life ebbing away slowly. I thought that was down to these feelings that I was having in my body was down to just getting older, but it wasn't. The fatigue was the best way I can describe it is it was like someone had stuck a syringe in me and slowly sucking the life out of me. At times I couldn't even stand up. That's how bad it was.
yeah,
And at the time I was, in my early 40s. So that came as a huge shock. Um, but my wife, she just the ladies in the clinic said you're going to be okay, you're going to be fine. It's a perfectly manageable condition now. But I didn't believe them,
yeah,
because I was brought up in the 80s, with the Grim Reaper
yeah,
adverts
that's right.
and what have you. So that was a rough time, but I just leaned on into God more. Started putting Him first. I was getting up early in the morning, and I still get up early in the morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I have an hour with God, reading and praying, and I've done that consistently every single day. as with my training, for the past 3 years. And I like to use this analogy. If you put everything into training in the gym, you'll see results over time. And it's the same with God. If you put in the time, put in the effort, then you'll start to see results. And I'm seeing them results now in my life. He's blessing me with an amazing job, working with people that are struggling with addiction. I'm a HIV activist as well.
What does that mean?
Basically, I'm spreading awareness about HIV, what it's like to live with HIV. I went onto TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and started sharing my story, and it just exploded to the point now where I've got over 30,000 followers between all my social medias. And I'm sharing the realities of living with HIV, that you can live just as long as anyone else. I take 1 pill a day, that's it, that's how much HIV affects my life, and I visit the clinic once every 6 months. In fact, I went to the clinic yesterday and had some blood work done, and then in 2 weeks I get the results to tell me what they tell me every time, that I'm undetectable. Basically, undetectable means that when I was diagnosed with HIV, if I took a black marker pen and put as many dots over your body as I possibly could, black dots, that was HIV when I was diagnosed in my body. I was ravaged by it. Now there's 1 dot. So the drugs that I'm on, so that it's 1 tablet, 3 drugs in 1 pill, suppress the virus to an undetectable level in the body, which means I cannot transmit HIV to anyone. Even through unprotected sex, it can't happen. So that's what undetectable means. You equals you, they call it. So
what about your wife? Did she have it as well? Or?
No.
So just you?
Yeah.
If you were to sum up your whole experience in 1 minute, just.
Well, I don't think I'll do it in 1 minute, but I can tell you what my life is like now, with living with Jesus instead of, or living with God instead of, not.
What are you free from?
Free from addiction, free from all the sexuality issues that I had for many years. I don't feel that I'm useless or dumb or thick anymore. God is showing me, or has been showing me over 3 years, that I'm capable of way more than what I possibly could have imagined. Giving my testimonies now in multiple churches.
You feel you've got a purpose now?
Oh, yeah, I feel like I've got a purpose. He's using all of the stuff that I went through, all of that pain and agony and suffering for 42 years. I'm now using every bit of that to help other people. I work in an organisation called Teen Challenge, which is a Christian-run drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre. So that's the addiction side of things that is now being used to help other guys, and also sexuality and HIV. I'm now using that to help people as well. It's something that's not spoken about enough in church. It's something I've felt that a lot of churches don't want to go near, is sexuality side of things. And they need to, because it's real life stuff, and I just felt strongly when all of this kicked off in July of 2021. I didn't want no one to know about my HIV. I didn't want no one to know that I struggled with sexuality. I didn't want anyone to know about any of it. But I felt so strongly in my spirit that God was telling me, leading me towards, I want you to share all of it. If you give your testimony, I want you to share all of it. I don't want you to miss anything out. Because it glorifies him. It shows how amazing he is, because I feel free. For the first time in my 45 years living on this planet, I feel free, I feel at peace, I have purpose, and I've got direction. And that's all because of him.
What's your marriage like then?
Awesome. Awesome. I'm never out. Now, I was out every night or every other night pre-2021. Now I don't even like going out. We love each other's company. We sit down and watch a movie with each other every night, every single night without fail. When I'm at home, because obviously I work away. My relationship with my kids, it's everything has been restored.
Brilliant.
And it's crazy, because that should have ended most marriages, what we went through. It would have, but it hasn't. Everything's been restored, and I believe that's because I've been putting him first and putting Jesus at the head, and trusting him completely. And that's the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing now, and why I am where I am. I should have been dead multiple times, multiple times over the years. You know, it's a miracle that I'm even here. So even in the times I wasn't following him and trusting him and all that, he was still there looking out for me and protecting me. And it all led up to that moment 3 years ago in July where everything changed.
When you hit rock bottom.
Yeah, and I prayed out a prayer to him. You know, one of my first prayers I prayed, you know, after I gave my life back to him, is I will go where you want me to go. I will say what you want me to say, and do what you want me to do. You should be very careful when you pray that, because
He might take you up on it.
yeah, I mean, like public speaking, for instance, you know, I've done it a few times now. It terrifies me, and it all stems back to, you know, past trauma, you know, and being told you never amount to anything, and you know, and it's only with his strength that I'm able to get up there and do what I do, and working at Teens Challenge pushes you every day out of your comfort zones. You have to do chapels, you know, and you've got 25, 30 guys, you know, some serious guys, some of them, and you're giving chapel and, you know, giving them advice, and you know, so but it's good. I'm thriving off of that now, you know, and also showing on social media that you can be fit, strong and healthy living with HIV is another big thing for me. And it's what drives me in the gym. I train for an hour and a half every day, hour of weights, 30 minutes of cardio, and just show that you can be happy, healthy, you know, and even out of what seems like an absolute disaster can come so much positivity and goodness, you know, and that's thanks to Jesus Christ, my Lord and Saviour.